depends on your relationship with the spirit.
So it doesn't all have to be like ceremony.
Oh no.
Like you could use like certain folks, ways of
Definitely.
Okay.
I would just say, like, I always tell people to experiment with as many different methods as they can and just see what works for them the best.
How much do you know like it's safe enough?
Safe-
It's almost like you can never have too much protection.
No, and like I think that especially when you're working with this stuff, just it's never going to be totally safe. I mean, that's just the nature of these entities, and I mean, you've got to be willing to take certain risks to do this, and there's just straight up a certain element of danger associated with it, and that's just something you got to accept. Really, there's nothing. No one achieves anything good without taking risks, and that's just a reality. Like, you have to. It's actually a literal. Oh shit! I forget the etymology here. The Latin roots of the word, dominion and lordship are inherently connected to the words for danger and trouble. And that's actually specifically from the Book of the Law. Ra Harkuit is like, yeah, you'll have danger and trouble, but I'm going to be here. So, like, when that shows up, then let me know, and we'll take care of it.
So how many of them have you actually done magical workings with approximately?
I have no idea. I've been working with the Goetia for 12 years, so a lot of
But
them.
have you, used all 72 of them? Or?
I've tried most of them. Just because of the metal aspect, I don't tend to work with the solar ones because gold is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried to use substitutions and cheaper stuff, but you kind of got to spend the money, especially if you're talking to like a Demon King or something like that. They expect you to invest a certain amount into it.
Okay.
And paper sigils are really just a bad way to go, I would say, although I've had limited success using the Golden Dawn initiation rituals to charge it with the planetary energy of the metal that I'm trying to work with. And that sometimes works. It never works more than once. You can't really reuse it, but it occasionally will actually be effective, depending on the spirit.
So if you use paper and you charge it with the planetary energy, once you use it for that one ritual, it's done.
Yeah, I mean, that's been my experience, at least.
Have you ever coupled with working with Goetic spirits with angels? Like, not the fallen angels, but the ones that are still sitting?
The traditional method is each of these has a controlling angel that you would invoke before. I mean, everyone doesn't use the Goetia that way, and you don't need to do it that way with the Goetia. I like in any ritual that I do, I start off by invoking the 10 Asiatic archangels, and if I hit a wall, I tend to invoke an angel that I know is going to help me with the situation. So it's good to be able to pull that up, and that's part of the reason that it's good to evoke angelic spirits, particularly because you want to create a relationship with them, a familiarity with them, so that when you do need them to show up and help you out, then you know what they're like and you can communicate with them.
Because in Louisiana Voodoo, I was taught to Archangel Michael Campbell's for protection.
Yeah.
To wrap my head but it feels kind of weird when you're working with an angel and then you're working with an inferno. Would they judge you in any way? Would they start seeing you as sort of
Hostile? Well,
yeah.
the traditional method of the Goetic evocations are all prefaced with very Christian things right out of the Bible, and you usually are commanding the demon in the name of Jesus Christ and so on and so forth.
So how does that work with, I don't know, I always had a hard time understanding.
Well, it seems like the association is because you're working with a demon, you must be somehow infernally inclined, whereas in the ancient world that wasn't the case at all. I mean, it was usually priests doing these rituals and doing this stuff.
So it's kind of like you're not buddies with the experience.
No, you can't be their buddies. You can. I've tried. It's like it's like it always makes me think of people who have pet snakes. It's like if the snake gets big enough, it will eat you. It will make that decision. However great friends you seem to be with it, and however much you think it likes you, it only hasn't eaten you because you're too big for it to swallow. And if that ever changes, then it will turn around and it will go that direction.
So basically, you keep referring to using Christian angels and stuff, and then the Goetic spirits. So, if this is based kind of in Christianity, then these Goetic spirits are kind of evil. So it's does that make sense, or?
The angels aren't limited to Christianity, right?
No.
They have a very far history back beyond Christian.
Yeah,
I just don't
I-
like the Christian aspect.
A lot of people have problems with that.
Then it makes
Um,
because then it makes me think of my childhood, and then I think if I mess with these goetic things, I'll go with
I know what you mean, and
Well,
I've had
you're
two.
already going to hell, but even here it doesn't exist.
I've had 2 partnerships. I've been to. that was the whole thing that happened after my HJ working. But yeah, I think that a lot of people have a problem with that, and my 2 major partners in Goetic workings had problems with that, and I wish that there was a simple solution. I've tried other methods in using like pagan gods to do that, and I just found them not effective. And I've had scryers completely break down with like images of crucified Jesus popping up and stuff like
Yeah.
that, and then they just like lose their shit completely. So we tried to rewrite the stuff to take that out, and it just didn't work as well. That may be part of me, because just like I don't have that in my background at all. I was raised in a completely atheistic household, so it's not. I don't have the same negative associations.
You need a partner for goetic workings?
You don't need one.
Like, because you're talking about the scryer, because I know that's from John D. and
Yeah.
Edward.
People like to work with that system just because it's a lot easier to focus and a lot easier. A, if one of you starts to blow up, the other one can notice and see that it's happening and do something to stop it. And B, I find personally, I have the worst problem, because I scry and record all my own stuff. I very rarely find that I can work effectively with a partner. I've only had one that it ever worked with, and that eventually, specifically because I was working with the Goetia, kind of fell through. But so it is nice to have that, just like to have just one person who their whole job is to just sit there and look at the spirit and just tell everyone else what they're seeing. One of my friends compared them to the red shirts on Star Trek, because they're kind of the ones you're sending out there to find out like what's, and it can be very draining. And if you are working in a partnership like that, definitely pay attention to what the other person is saying, because certain people who are actually performing and operating the ritual can start to get very demanding, and scrying can be very draining depending on what you're actually doing.
So would goetic workings make scrying easier, or would you have to like practice and be good at it?
Actually, I would highly recommend it as a way to get into scrying and get into astral work, just because, first of all, astral work can be very abstract sometimes, and because you're dealing with a specific entity and a spirit that's supposed to be there, and you don't have to go to the place to see the thing has come to you and you can see it. So it's a good way to develop that skill, I think.
Like, so do you have to use scrying, or do you use poker cards? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
that's how I read. You could.
Crowley used, actually, interestingly, he used the Ouija board quite a bit.
So, but because you're seeing images in scrying,
Yeah.
or whatever it is you're using, like with the poker cards, it would, like, how would that work?
Well,
Like,
it
would
would.
you have to be really good at telling fortune with cards, so you can see specific details?
It would help.
Okay.
It would definitely help. And I find that it's a good idea to try to have a conversation with the spirit when it's present. Just,
Figure out how it works.
yeah, and see what it says, too. Like, see where it goes.
How do you know you've conjured the right spirit? Like,
That's a huge problem. That's a huge, very difficult thing to do, and identifying the spirit is one of the biggest deal. Personally, what I do, and what Crowley did a lot of the time, he would have his scryers, and he would ask the spirit questions, but he would just show them the first letter of each word to see if the spirit knew what he was trying to say, and then he'd get a response from the person. And a lot of times what Crowley would do is use keywords. So in his system, he uses the Hebrew and Greek alphabets, which correspond to certain numbers. So you could get like a number from the spirit, or a word from the spirit, compute the numbers, and then see if the other words that would add up to the same number in Hebrew and Greek were coharmonious with what he was trying to say, or with the name of the spirit, or the identification of the spirit. So that was sort of his main method, and I find that's a very effective method.
okay, so the goetic spirit they would be able to get that right.
Oh yeah, when you read the records of these workings, it's phenomenal how because this person he's talking to, who's talking to the spirit, has absolutely no idea what he's asking. But
So it's not like they're gonna have like an off day or anything like that. Like,
oh, everyone has off days.
No, but like it's like so that's
Well, one of the problems is what I would.
like maybe they were just confused that day.
Mm.
Possible. Like,
But also, I mean, there's a lot of, like I say, when we do these rituals, we start to attract the attention of all the spiritual entities in our area, and there are a lot of things thinking that they are able to get something out of us or manipulate us into doing something, they will pretend to be the spirit that we're trying to talk to like.
That's the whole point of verifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kinds of things would they manipulate us into doing, typically, or I don't know if there's any such thing as typical advice?
I think it's hard to know the long-term ramifications. You know, we talked about that movie before, Fallen, right? The reason I said that I thought that was the only movie that realistically portrayed this stuff is the demon wants a result. It doesn't necessarily need us to carry out the whole plan. It needs us to do one little thing that sets off another thing, that sets off another thing, and we can't even see that happening. I compare it to being in an airplane. Like if you fly in a Pearson Airport and you're coming down over the highway, you can see what all the cars on the highway are doing, and you can watch them like move around, and you can tell, okay, because this guy moved here, he's going to slow that lane down. But the person like 4 car lengths behind him has absolutely no idea what's happening there. But the goetic demons have that perspective where they can actually tell like what causing this little, creating this little cause that has this effect, and then this little effect, and this little effect. So in the long term, it's like the butterfly effect, and then they get what they're after, whatever that might be. But you might not even see that happening.